Chapter 1: The Infinite Vault. The ocean does not keep secrets in the way human beings do. It does not hide them behind lock and key, nor does it bury them under heavy dust and forgotten stone. It simply holds them within its vast, moving dark, carrying them far beneath a horizon that never truly ends. For thousands of years, seafaring nations have looked out at that thin, curved line where sea meets sky, knowing that once a vessel crosses it, it steps into a realm where human rules no longer apply. Most ships return. Their hulls carry salt and rust. Their logbooks record predictable winds and calculated currents, and their crews tell stories around warm fires in bustling ports. But every so often, a ship sails into that quiet expanse and leaves the world behind forever. It does not always sink into the dark abyssal plains. It does not always break upon jagged coastal rocks. Sometimes, the physical vessel remains entirely intact, floating gently upon the ocean swell, undamaged and perfectly seaworthy, while every human soul aboard vanishes into thin air. We like to tell ourselves that the modern Earth is fully mapped, that every square mile of blue sea is charted, tracked by satellites, and monitored by digital transponder signals. Yet beneath the endless noise of modern civilization, the ocean remains ancient, deep, and utterly indifferent to human endeavor. The history of seafaring is quietly littered with these floating tombs, vessels that became disconnected from linear time and human logic. Mariners throughout the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries frequently spoke of encounters with silent craft drifting in the doldrums or locked in ice, completely devoid of life yet showing no evidence of battle, disease, or storm damage. These encounters were rarely publicized in mainstream press, remaining buried in Admiralty records, insurance claims at Lloyd's of London, and private logbooks kept by commercial captains. The physical evidence left behind on these decks often raised more questions than it answered, pointing towards sudden, precise disruptions that targeted the crew while leaving the dead wood and iron entirely unbothered. Consider the baseline mechanics of an ocean voyage during the golden age of sail and early steam. A ship is a closed ecosystem, a self-contained habitat engineered specifically to preserve human life against an environment that is fundamentally hostile to it. Every beam, every bolt, every yard of canvas is designed to withstand the crushing forces of nature. For a crew to willingly abandon such a structure, the perceived threat within or around the vessel must instantly outweigh the guaranteed fatality of the open ocean. Yet, time and again, inspection logs reveal that these ships were abandoned when they were in no danger whatsoever of sinking. The timbers were sound, the pumps were dry, and the galley stoves were still warm. This dichotomy, the intact sanctuary of the vessel versus the total disappearance of its inhabitants, presents an intellectual dilemma that maritime historians have struggled to resolve for generations. Was it a collective madness brought on by environmental toxins, a sudden localized atmospheric disturbance that rendered the vessel uninhabitable for a brief, critical window, or something far more deliberate? The archival records contain numerous accounts of vessels found under such circumstances, but the official explanations almost always fall short, relying on improbable coincidences to bridge the gaps in physical evidence. As we examine these accounts, we must look beyond the simplified narratives that have entered popular folklore. We must examine the precise condition of the ships at the moment of their discovery, the weather patterns recorded in surrounding logs, the geopolitical climate of the regions in which they drifted, and the strange, consistent anomalies that tie these disparate events together across centuries. Tonight, as the world around you grows quiet and the lights of the land fade into memory, we step away from the shore and look out over those silent waters. We begin a rigorous investigation into the legendary vessels that drifted beyond the veil of the known world, starting with the singular event that defined maritime mythology forever. Chapter 2. The Drift of the D.A. Gracia. On a cold, grey December afternoon in 1872, the British merchant brigantine D.A. Gracia was cutting through the heavy Atlantic waves, roughly 600 miles off the coast of Portugal. Captain David Morehouse stood on the quarterdeck, scanning the choppy water through his brass glass. In the distance, framed against a dull winter sky, he spotted a sail moving erratically. The vessel was lurching heavily, its sail set awkwardly on a port tack while the wind was coming from starboard, taking the gusts in a dangerous manner that no experienced crew would permit. As the D.A. Gracia closed the distance over 2 tense hours, Captain Morehouse recognized the distinct lines of the approaching ship. It was the Mary Celeste, a 282-ton brigantine that had departed New York for Genoa a month prior. Morehouse knew the vessel well. He had dined with her commander, Captain Benjamin Briggs, just days before both ships set sail from Manhattan. Briggs was a deeply religious, meticulous mariner with an immaculate record, a man who would never allow his sails to flap aimlessly in a fair breeze. He was a seasoned navigator who had spent his entire life at sea, known for his cautious nature, his disciplined crew management, and his absolute adherence to safety protocols. Morehouse ordered his crew to hail the ship. Their shouts drifted across the open water, answered only by the hollow groan of rigging and the slap of waves against timber. No lookout stood at the bow, no hands tended the running gear, and no helmsman guided the wheel, which swung wildly back and forth with every passing wave. The ship was drifting entirely aimlessly, carried only by the deep Atlantic swell. The rigging was in a state of mild disrepair, with some ropes hanging loose over the sides, but the hull sat high and stable in the water, showing no signs of heavy distress or structural failure. Realizing something was terribly wrong, Morehouse ordered First Mate Oliver DeVoe to lower a boat and row across the dark sea with a small boarding crew. Clambering over the gunwale of the silent vessel, the men stepped onto a wet, echoing deck. They called out down the companionways, their voices carrying into the dark holds, but the only response was the creak of timber and the rhythmic drip of water. The Mary Celeste was physically intact and fully alive, yet completely deserted by every human soul. The boarding party proceeded with a systematic search of the deck and holds. They found that the ship's primary pump was operational, with only a normal amount of water in the bilge, nothing that a crew could not have cleared in 20 minutes of routine pumping. The hatch covers over the main hold were unfastened, though 2 of them had been removed and lay beside the hatchways. The sails were in fair condition, though some were torn where they had been left to flap in the wind. The vessel was, for all practical purposes, entirely seaworthy. DeVoe noted that there was no sign of panic or chaos on deck. The ship's wheel was not locked or broken, it was simply untended. The binnacle, which held the ship's main compass, had been knocked from its brass stand and broken, a detail that stood out as unusually violent compared to the rest of the ship's orderly appearance. Otherwise, the deck looked as if the crew had simply stepped away for a moment and forgotten to return. The utter absence of any living creature, even the ship's cat, which was standard on merchant vessels of the era, created an overwhelming sense of unnatural stillness that chilled the veteran mariners of the D.I. Gracia. Chapter 3. A Moment Frozen in Time. When Oliver DeVoe and his crew descended into the captain's cabin, they found a scene that defied all conventional logic. There were no marks of violence, no bloodstains on the woodwork, no splintered hatches, and no indications of a sudden, desperate panic. Captain Briggs's personal belongings were neatly in place. His wife Sarah's sewing machine sat on the desk alongside an unfinished letter, and a small toy belonging to their 2-year-old daughter Sophia lay undisturbed on a berth. The air in the cabin smelled faintly of damp wood and aged paper, but contained no trace of smoke, rot, or foul odors. In the ship's galley, provisions were abundant and meticulously stored. There was enough food and fresh water on board to sustain a crew for 6 full months, and the stores showed no damage from seawater. A meal appeared to have been left mid-preparation, with pans sitting in order upon the stove. Yet, despite this calm interior, something had abruptly halted the rhythm of daily life on board. The crew's quarters in the forecastle were similarly undisturbed. Their weather coats, boots, and personal pipes were left in their bunks, drying off as if they expected to return from a shift on deck within minutes. The ship's logbook was open on the mate's desk. Its final entry had been written at 8 o'clock on the morning of November 25th, 10 days prior, recording calm weather near the island of Santa Maria in the Azores, over 500 miles to the west. The slate in the cabin, used for temporary daily notations before transferring them to the permanent log, recorded that the ship had passed Santa Maria at dawn. Beyond that single written sentence, time on the Mary Celeste had simply stopped. The ship's navigation tools, the chronometer, the sextant, and the primary paperwork were missing from the cabin. The single yawl-style lifeboat was gone, its launching ropes hanging cleanly from the stern davits rather than being hacked away with axes in a hurry. 10 human beings, Captain Briggs, his wife, his young daughter, and 7 experienced, vetted sailors, had vanished into the endless expanse of the Atlantic, leaving behind a perfectly sound ship floating like a ghost upon a quiet mirror. A detailed examination of the captain's quarters revealed further puzzling details. The drawers of the desk were pulled out, but their contents were not ransacked. Valuable silk dresses belonging to Mrs. Briggs remained in her wardrobe, and a watch made of solid gold lay on a shelf beside the bed. If the ship had been raided by hostile forces, these items would have been the first to disappear. Instead, they sat untouched, frozen in place alongside the mundane artifacts of maritime life. Furthermore, the physical condition of the cabin suggested that the occupants had left in a hurry, but not in a frenzy. Warm clothing had been left behind despite the chilly December air of the mid-Atlantic. It was as if the decision to leave the vessel had been made instantly, executed within a matter of minutes, and carried out with such singularity of purpose that no one thought to grab coats, extra boots, or personal mementos. They simply walked out onto the deck, climbed into a small wooden boat, and detached themselves from their only source of shelter. Chapter 4: The Whispering Cargo. In the weeks following its discovery, the Mary Celeste was brought into port at Gibraltar by the salvage crew of the D.I. Gracia, where formal Admiralty inquiries began to dissect every square inch of the vessel. Investigators searched for clues beneath the floorboards, examining the hull for marks of collisions, underwater rocks, or attacks by sea rovers. Yet pirates were instantly ruled out. The sailors' personal clothing, valuables, and chest of coins remained untouched, and the vessel's primary cargo was completely intact. Below decks lay 1,701 heavy wooden barrels of industrial denatured alcohol, worth a massive fortune at the time. Upon detailed inspection, however, investigators noted that 9 of those barrels were entirely empty. This single detail opened the door to a chilling, physical explanation that remains one of the most compelling scientific theories to this day. Denatured alcohol is volatile, releasing invisible, highly explosive gas when exposed to fluctuations in temperature and humidity. As the ship moved from the cold American coast toward the warmer climate of the Azores, the alcohol in those 9 porous red oak barrels likely leaked into the dark, unventilated hold. Fumes would have built up beneath the hatches, invisible and odorless, creating immense pressure. It is entirely plausible that a sudden rumble, a sharp hiss of escaping gas, or a minor micro-explosion threw open the main hatch covers without scorching the wood. Believing the ship was about to detonate beneath their feet, Captain Briggs would have made the logical, immediate decision to temporarily evacuate his family and crew into the small boat. They would have tethered the lifeboat to the main vessel's stern with a heavy tow line, waiting at a safe distance for the dangerous fumes to clear. Then, the ocean intervened. A sudden Atlantic squall or an unexpected swell could have snapped the tension-strained tow line. The crew could only watch in terror as the Mary Celeste, her sails fully set to the wind, glided swiftly away into the mist, leaving 10 people trapped in a tiny, overburdened wooden boat in the middle of a vast, silent ocean, far from any land. Yet this theory, compelling as it appears on the surface, presents significant technical inconsistencies when subjected to modern chemical and naval analysis. Red oak barrels, while porous, rarely fail simultaneously in such a localized manner without leaving significant liquid residue or heavy staining on the ballast below. When the boarding party first entered the hold at sea, they reported no lingering smell of alcohol fumes, an environmental detail that would have been overwhelming had 9 barrels evaporated rapidly in an enclosed space. Additionally, the construction of the hatch covers showed no signs of internal pressure displacement. The wooden battens used to secure the canvas tarpaulins over the hatches were found stowed on deck, not blown outward by an explosive force. If an explosion had occurred, it was an explosion that left no soot, no scorch marks, no splintered wood, and no chemical trace upon the surrounding timber. If the alcohol theory fails to account for these physical realities, we are forced to consider alternative scenarios. Could the leakage have created an invisible, toxic atmosphere that induced acute neurological distress before any physical explosion could take place? Industrial denatured alcohol of that era often contained heavy concentrations of methanol and other crude additives. Prolonged exposure to concentrated vapors in a confined environment can cause sudden optic nerve swelling, intense migraines, profound paranoia, and severe disorientation. Did the crew abandon the vessel not out of fear of a fire, but because the very air inside the ship had turned poisonous, driving them to seek relief on the open water? Chapter 5. The Shadows Between Official Lines. While the official Admiralty reports eventually leaned toward an accidental evacuation, whisperings of a far stranger, more sinister nature lingered in maritime circles. Independent investigators and legal experts who examined the Gibraltar court records noted a series of strange anomalies that official records seemed eager to gloss over or suppress entirely. Certain timber marks on the bow rails looked as though they had been deliberately carved or cut away, and strange dark stains on Captain Briggs's ornamental sword initially sparked violent theories of murder, though chemical tests proved the stains were rust. Curiously, the court proceedings were overseen by Frederick Solly Flood, the Attorney General of Gibraltar, who displayed an intense, almost obsessive desire to prove foul play, insurance fraud, or a conspiracy between Briggs and Morehouse. Solly Flood's prosecution strategy was aggressive and unyielding. He held the Mary Celeste in port for months, conducting exhaustive chemical analyses on every scrape of paint and every metal fitting. He repeatedly cross-examined the crew of the DI Gracia, attempting to trap them in contradictions regarding the position of the sails, the state of the towline, and the exact nature of the broken compass. His behavior suggested that the British Admiralty was deeply concerned about something far beyond a simple salvage claim, something that threatened to expose sensitive naval vulnerabilities or commercial irregularities in the Atlantic trade routes. Furthermore, archives from the Admiralty court show that key testimonies from the salvors were redacted, and several logbooks from surrounding British naval vessels operating off the Portuguese coast during that exact week were permanently restricted from public access. Why was there such intense official interest in a simple merchant vessel? Some researchers pointed to secret naval trials taking place off the European coast, involving early underwater mines or pressure wave weapons that could inflict severe acoustic trauma on a crew without damaging a ship's hull. Others noted localized geomagnetic anomalies around the Azores, known to render compasses useless and induce profound psychological distress, auditory hallucinations, and intense panic in human beings exposed to them over prolonged periods. The geographic coordinates where the Mary Celeste was abandoned sit directly along a known seismic fault line running through the Azores-Gibraltar Transform Fault. Undersea earthquakes in this region frequently generate high-intensity infrasound, sound waves below the threshold of human hearing that propagate through water and solid timber. Infrasound at specific frequencies, around 7 to 19 Hz, is known to resonate directly with the human eye and internal organs, causing sudden visual distortions, profound feelings of dread, hyperventilation, and an uncontrollable urge to flee one's immediate environment. Could a sudden, intense burst of undersea infrasound have rendered the interior of the ship unbearable to its crew, driving them over the side in a state of sudden, inexplicable terror? Whatever truly transpired on November 25, 1872, the full truth was quietly subsumed by the sea and official silence, leaving behind a narrative that feels less like a simple accident and more like an event carefully erased by unseen hands. Chapter 6: The Wandering Ice Ship. The phenomenon of the Mary Celeste is not an isolated scar on the history of navigation. Decades later, far to the north in the brutal, freezing expanse of the Arctic Ocean, another vessel began a terrifying journey into phantom history. The SS Bedtime, a 1,300-ton steel-hulled cargo steamer owned by the Hudson's Bay Company, was trapped in crushing pack ice off the coast of Alaska in late October 1931. The ship was on a routine trading voyage, carrying a rich cargo of valuable furs and pelts collected from remote trading posts along the northern coast. Her crew was experienced in polar navigation, used to the unpredictable movement of the winter ice fields. But the winter of 1831 arrived with unusual speed and violence. The pack ice closed in around the vessel near the town of Barrow, locking her hull in a vice-like grip that threatened to crush her steel plates like tin. The crew, facing a freezing death in the middle of a brutal Arctic winter, abandoned the ship and constructed temporary wooden shelters on the ice floes a short distance away. They maintained a watch over the vessel, hoping that an early thaw or a shift in the prevailing winds would relieve the pressure on her hull. After a fierce, multi-day blizzard cleared, they emerged from their shelters to find the Bedtime gone. The ice field was shattered, and the captain assumed the heavy steel ship had been crushed by the tremendous pressure and sunk into the freezing abyss. However, the Arctic Ocean had not taken her. Days later, an Inuit hunter reported seeing the vessel drifting silently through open water miles away, completely intact and floating upright. The crew managed to track her down, retrieve their most valuable furs, and leave her once more, believing she was too damaged to survive the shifting winter ice. They assumed that the coming spring would inevitably see her sink to the seabed. Yet for nearly 40 years, the SS Bedtime refused to sink. She became the ultimate ghost ship of the far north, wandering thousands of miles through the frozen Beaufort Sea. She was spotted dozens of times by hunters, scientists, and polar explorers, sometimes locked in solid ice, sometimes floating silently through dense summer fogs, her unmanned helm steering her through narrow channels where human captains routinely wrecked. The mechanics of her survival defy standard naval engineering. A steel vessel abandoned in polar waters is subject to relentless thermal expansion, ice pressure, and corrosion. Without a crew to maintain the boilers, heat the hull, or operate the bilge pumps, a ship should succumb to rust, ice damage, or hull breaches within a few seasons at most. Yet the Bedtime remained perfectly buoyant, her structural integrity preserved by the very cold that had trapped her. Intrepid crews boarded her several times over the decades, finding her cabin silent, covered in thick frost, yet fully preserved in a deep freeze state. Every attempt to salvage or tow her to port was thwarted by sudden, violent shifts in weather or sudden sea ice movements that seemed to guard the ship. In 1939, a group of polar traders boarded her and attempted to sail her out, but an unexpected storm locked them in the ice for weeks, forcing them to flee for their lives and leave the ghost ship behind once more. She was last sighted in 1969, drifting off the icy shore of Point Barrow, a ghost of steel and ice that completely defied modern naval physics. Subsequent aerial surveys and sonar sweeps of the region have failed to locate her wreckage on the ocean floor, leaving her ultimate fate unknown. Did she finally sink into the dark Arctic waters, or is she still floating somewhere in the uncharted ice pack, locked in permanent winter? Chapter 7: The Stranding at Diamond Shoals. Moving south from the frozen north to the warm, turbulent waters of the North Carolina coast, the story of the Carroll A. Deering presents an equally disturbing maritime puzzle. In late January 1921, the massive, five-masted commercial schooner was returning to Maine from Rio de Janeiro, passing the Cape Lookout lightship. The Deering was a majestic vessel, one of the largest wooden schooners ever constructed, built to withstand the heaviest Atlantic weather. She was commanded by Captain Willis Wormel, a veteran mariner who had been brought in at the last minute to replace her original captain due to illness. Wormel was known as a strict disciplinarian, a trait that had reportedly created severe friction between him and the newly recruited crew during their stay in South America. The lightship keeper at Cape Lookout reported that a tall, thin man with a strange accent appeared on the Deering's deck as she passed, shouting through a megaphone that the vessel had lost its anchors in a storm. The keeper noted that the crew on deck seemed sullen, disorganized, and drifted about aimlessly, while Captain Wormel himself was nowhere to be seen. Strange, too, was the fact that the lightship's radio was inexplicably out of order, preventing an immediate alert to the Coast Guard. Days later, on January 31st, 1921, the Carroll A. Deering was spotted run aground on the treacherous, shifting sands of Diamond Shoals, an area notorious as the graveyard of the Atlantic. Her 5 masts were standing, her sails were set, but there was no sign of life on board. Heavy weather delayed boarding parties for several days, as pounding surf made approaching the stranded vessel extremely dangerous. When Coast Guard rescuers finally reached the stranded schooner, they found a completely deserted ship. The sails were set, the ship's steering gear was completely smashed, and in the galley, a full meal had been prepared: ribs, soup, and coffee, left sitting in pots on the stove, as if the crew were just about to sit down for dinner. Yet every single soul on board had vanished. The crew's personal belongings, the logbook, the navigation equipment, and both lifeboats were gone. The ship's navigational charts were scattered across the cabin floor, showing red ink marks that abruptly stopped miles before the vessel ran aground. Extensive federal investigations conducted simultaneously by the FBI, the U.S. Navy, the Treasury, and the State Department uncovered strange connections to multiple other ships that had vanished without a trace in the exact same region during those same 2 weeks. Herbert Hoover, who was serving as Secretary of Commerce at the time, personally oversaw the investigation into the Deering and the surrounding disappearances. Federal agents examined theories ranging from Bolshevik terrorism, as Soviet agents were suspected of operating in American waters, to rum-running syndicates and widespread mutiny. The captain's private journal, found partially burned in his cabin stove, contained cryptic entries regarding his distrust of the first mate, suggesting that a mutiny may have broken out shortly before the ship reached the North Carolina coast. Yet the mutiny theory fails to explain why the crew, having seized control of a perfectly functional, massive schooner, would intentionally steer her directly into the deadly sands of Diamond Shoals and then vanish entirely without leaving a single trace on land. If they fled in the lifeboats, where did they land? No lifeboats were ever recovered along the eastern seaboard, and no survivors ever surfaced in any port worldwide. Early, hushed official reports raised the possibility of organized piracy, hidden undersea trenches, or coordinated abductions, but no definitive conclusion was ever released to the public. Chapter 8: The Pacific Silence of the Droida. In October 1955, in the remote blue expanse of the South Pacific, the merchant vessel MV Droida set sail from Samoa on a routine 48-hour trading run to the Tokelau Islands. She carried 25 people, including passengers, crew, a medical officer, and a valuable cargo of copra, timber, and medical supplies. The Droida was a 70-foot luxury wooden vessel outfitted with heavy cork lining along her hull and heavy refrigeration units, making her virtually unsinkable. She was commanded by Captain Thomas Dusty Miller, an experienced British sailor who was deeply familiar with the waters of the South Pacific. When she failed to arrive at her destination, a massive Royal New Zealand Air Force search covered thousands of square miles of open ocean, but found no trace of oil slicks, debris, or lifeboats. 5 weeks later, the Droida was spotted drifting over 600 miles off her intended route by a merchant vessel. She was heavily listing to port and partially submerged, yet still floating effortlessly due to her unique, buoyant construction. When boarding parties climbed the decks, they found an eerie, chilling silence that mirrored the scenes found on the Mary Celeste 83 years prior. The ship was completely abandoned. Her clocks had stopped at 10:25, indicating a total electric failure. The main radio was tuned to the International Maritime Distress Frequency, but upon closer inspection, technicians made a shocking discovery. The radio's wiring had been intentionally disconnected from the antenna, disabling all transmission capabilities despite the equipment being fully functional. On the deck, a doctor's bag lay open with bloody bandages unrolled across the floorboards. Yet a thorough examination revealed no signs of violence or injuries on the ship. The entire cargo of medical supplies and food had been systematically removed, while 4 tons of timber remained untouched. The ship's engine room was flooded with water up to the floorboards, caused by a corroded pipe in the cooling system, but the bilge pumps were in working order and could easily have handled the leak had they been engaged. The official inquiry conducted by the New Zealand government was baffled by the evidence. Why would Captain Miller, who knew better than anyone that the Droida was structurally unsinkable due to her cork lining and timber hull, order an evacuation into fragile rubber dinghies in open ocean water? The lifeboats were missing, along with the vessel's nautical equipment and chronometer. Speculation swirled across the Pacific. Rumors spread about remaining Japanese naval forces operating in secret from unmapped atolls, rogue Cold War submarines, or in violent internal dispute that escalated into massacre. Yet, no bodies were ever recovered. No rubber rafts were ever found washed ashore on any island, and no signal was ever picked up. The 25 passengers and crew simply vanished into the vast Pacific blue, leaving behind a floating hulk that refused to go down. Chapter 9. Patterns in the Deep Waters. When we lay these cases side by side across centuries and oceans, the Mary Celeste, the Bedtime, the Decaying, and the Droida, a subtle, deeply unsettling structure begins to emerge from the mist. In each instance, the ocean ultimately returned the ship, but claimed every single human being who inhabited it. In each case, investigators discovered the exact same disturbing detail. Daily routines interrupted in a split second. Food was left half prepared, logbooks stopped mid-sentence, and navigation instruments were selectively removed while vast fortunes in cargo were left untouched. These were not the actions of desperate people fleeing a sinking ship, but rather a cold, methodical evacuation triggered by something that left no physical marks on the wood or steel. Consider the common elements that link these events together. Structural integrity preserved. In every single case, the ship itself was found in a condition that guaranteed its survival. None of these vessels were in imminent danger of sinking at the moment they were abandoned. Selective disappearance of navigation tools. The crew systematically removed the tools required to determine position, sextants, chronometers, logbooks, and charts, while leaving behind gold, silver, personal clothing, and valuable commercial cargo. Disruption of communication. From the broken compass on the Mary Celeste to the severed radio wires on the Droida and the sudden radio failure near the Decaying, communication with the outside world was systematically cut before the crew vanished. Absence of biological traces. Despite intense investigations using the best available forensic techniques of their respective eras, no evidence of struggle, bloodshed, or mass violence was ever established in any of these primary cases. Modern science attempts to categorize these events using environmental terms. Researchers propose severe microbursts, sudden underwater methane gas blowouts that instantly reduce water density and create suffocating surface atmospheres, localized geomagnetic fluctuations that corrupt electronic instruments, or low-frequency infrasound generated by oceanic swells that can induce severe disorientation, acute psychosis, and violent panic in the human brain. Yet beneath these scientific theories lies a far deeper, darker shadow. History is full of quiet margins, unrecorded naval weapons trials, secret geopolitical trade networks, and deep ocean currents that move outside our maps. The ocean does not offer explanations for what occurs upon its surface. It simply absorbs human effort, leaving behind empty, hollow hulls to remind us of how fragile our presence on this planet truly is. Chapter 10. The Horizon Rested. As the night grows late and the world falls into deep silence, The ocean continues its endless, dark rhythm beneath the stars. Waves roll across thousands of miles of uncharted deep water, brushing against quiet, uninhabited shores, carrying the cold, pale light of the moon upon their crests. The ghost ships that drifted through history remain as silent monuments to the vast unknown. They serve as timeless reminders that beyond our bright cities, mapped roads, and satellite networks, the Earth still retains vast, untamed spaces where human logic simply ceases to function. The men and women who boarded these ships set out with clear purposes, calculated routes, and familiar routines, only to step across an unseen threshold where the physical laws of the world seem to shift. There is a profound, peaceful solitude in acknowledging the mysteries that refuse to be solved by human intellect. They do not demand our answers, nor do they care for our theories. They simply ask to be remembered as cold facts of the dark sea. The endless expanse of water absorbs all noise, all panic, and all history, smoothing the surface back into a flat, mirror-like stillness once the storm passes. The wood, iron, and steel of those lost hulls have long since settled into the blackness of the abyssal plains or dissolved back into the salt of the sea, resting far beneath the reach of surface storms and changing tides. The water settles into a smooth, dark surface, the current slow to a calm, steady drift, and the vast horizon closes gently under the stillness of the night sky. Sleep comes like the rising tide, smooth, silent, and inevitable, carrying every thought slowly out into the quiet deep.